Coming up on the show, a federal shutdown is just hours away and Georgia's economy hangs in the balance. We're going to show you what a shutdown in Washington could mean for families right here at home. Credit scores are slipping and wallets are feeling the weight. We're going to dig into what's behind the drop and how it's hitting Atlanta households. And we all know what a cluttered junk drawer looks like and what it can be, but what about your digital life? We're going to show you how older Americans can tidy up just a little bit. This is The Take. Let's get it. Hello and welcome. I'm Chesley McNeil, and this is The Take, where we go above and beyond the headlines and we look at the why and how stories are impacting you and your community. We invite the experts in to share their take on today's top stories, and we try to have a little bit of fun as well. Let's start off with this morning. Take a look at the tarmac at Hartsfield-Jackson. It's the world's busiest airport, as you know, but it's now fighting turbulence in a different kind of way. At least $37.5 million in federal money meant for key upgrades are off the table, tied not to travel, but a fight over diversity policies. City leaders say the loss in funding won't ground operations, but it does raise questions about how the airport will pay for projects and whether the city will bend or stand firm on its DEI commitments. Here to help us understand the fallout from this funding is Wesley Longhofer. He's the Associate Professor of Organization and Management at Emory. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
All right. Please explain to us how this tug of war between federal rules and local values makes sense for people just trying to catch a plane.
Well, I think one way to think about it is that all the headlines have been about Atlanta losing $37 million. But another way to think about it is that perhaps Atlanta thought that the economic benefit of these programs over 40 years is worth more than $37 million. You think about the impact the airport has. $60 billion in the Georgia economy, 60,000 employees or more. It's a huge player in our local economy, and perhaps they decided that it's worth it to keep these programs to support these small businesses than to do away with those programs to keep that $37 million. Yeah. It's important to keep in mind that $37 million is about 10% of the capital budget for all these upgrades, and so I imagine they're looking for other ways to find those funds.
You said it's not 10%, it's about 10%, or is it not 10%?
What I've read is it's roughly about 10% of the overall budget for upgrades.
So what's really at stake here? Is it the money itself, or is it the message that Atlanta is sending and standing by its DEI programs?
Well, I think if you think about the importance of these programs in our city, that the programs that are being scrutinized by the current federal administration are programs that originated with our airport. You look at what Maynard Jackson did to help support minority-owned businesses in our city. Doubled the number of Black-owned businesses during his tenure, a lot of that due to the airport and the contracts that businesses were getting. You think about the impact that has on employment, wealth generation, and we still have a long way to go in our city to close some of these gaps, but it's hard to imagine our airport being what it is without Maynard Jackson's efforts to help support small businesses. Mm-hmm. So I think it is about the values of our city, the identity of Atlanta, and this is kind of the Atlanta way to go out and take a stand on what they think is right for civil rights or social justice in our city. It does come with an economic cost, but I'm pretty confident that the mayor's office and the airport are looking for other ways to make up those funds. Yeah,
our viewer here is $37 million. They may be wondering, is that going to change the way the airport operates from day to day?
It doesn't appear to, from my knowledge, that this was going to be for upgrades on things like bathrooms, some sustainability programs that the airport had put in place to kind of reduce emissions. Again, we all want clean bathrooms and functioning bathrooms when we go to the airport. I don't anticipate this is going to disrupt daily operations in any way. I'm pretty confident in our airport to continue functioning without that $37 million, but I also can't predict the future.
Yeah. Do you think this is a one-off fight, or do you think this is the beginning of a trend where cities have to choose between money and DEI?
That's a really good question. I think what we've seen, whether it's universities, corporations, cities, this is a collective action problem. It's hard for any single organization or city to push back on their own, right? You want to do that kind of together with other cities and work together. We know that some cities are taking this to the courts and trying to take it to stop this this decision by the Trump administration to stop it at the court system. Atlanta decided to go a different way. I think collectively, cities are going to be looking to Atlanta for guidance on how to do this. Mm-hmm. These programs originated here. They're part of who we are. And this is a chance for Atlanta to lead the way.
Is it now, and I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but does the airport now look for private funding from somewhere else? They fundraise? How do they work that out to meet the gap?
They might go to bonds and try to raise it through bonds. They could do it through fees at the airport. I imagine that they're going to be pretty creative about this. They might go to philanthropic sources to help cover that gap, or they might be able to stretch the rest of the capital money to meet those upgrades without this $37 million. There's still a chance that the city might go back to the administration and get some of that money back, but the city's been pretty clear that they don't want to walk back on those commitments.
Yeah. As an Atlanta resident, why should you care about this debate? What would you tell people?
I'd say, think about all the different spillover effects that the airport has on our economy, all the people it employs, the small businesses it supports. Atlanta is where it is because that airport has been so successful. And so think about all the different ways that airport serves us, whether you're flying or not. We want to continue that work, and this has been a key part of that work. And so I think this is Atlanta just trying to figure out a way to keep doing what it does well. And I have faith in our great city, in our airport.
Absolutely. You only got a couple seconds left here. What would be, and I'm looking at worst case scenario, right? If they lost more funding, what would be one of the first things we would see as a difference?
Maybe the hand washing stations won't work in the bathrooms. I don't anticipate this is going to have a huge effect on the airport's operations. It's a massive budget, and this is a very small piece of it, and they're probably going to make up that money somewhere else. This is about Atlanta sticking to its values, and so I don't think it's going to disrupt daily operations at the airport in any way.
Wesley Longhofer, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for your insight this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, not a problem. Folks, it is going to be a decent day, not the best of the week, not my pick for the week, but we do have a mix of sun and clouds. We'll be dry for the most part. Now, we have a 20 to 30% chance for an isolated shower, 80 for the high temperature. If you like it warmer, tomorrow will be a little better. Even though we start off with the clouds in the morning, those clouds will get out of the way. We'll have the sunshine by the afternoon. And for those of you who have been waiting for fall, it will be here Thursday and Friday. 77 degrees for the high temperature on Thursday. Friday, we're looking at 78. We'll stay in the upper 70s as we head through the weekend, with the chance for rain coming back to us for the latter half of the weekend and into the beginning of next week. Stay with us, folks. We got much more for you coming up right after the break. Once again, attention focused on the nation's capital, where we are less than 24 hours away from federal government shutdown. Meanwhile, President Trump and congressional leaders held a face-to-face meeting yesterday, but with no compromise in place. Joining us now is NBC Washington correspondent Alice Barr. And Alice, we're going to talk about that. But first, we want to get to the president and defense secretary. They're addressing top military brass. What are we hearing about those remarks?
Yeah, so far, Chesley, we've been hearing from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who has been addressing this really unusual assembly of top brass, all of the top generals, top-ranking military officials that had been summoned from bases around the country, around the world, to hear what Pete Hegseth had said was going to be kind of an explanation of the warrior ethos and what he wants them to understand about the way that this Defense Department is operating under his leadership. Thus far, it's been a lot of discussion about wanting to root out any potential remnants of DEI initiatives that existed in the Defense Department when Hegseth came in and took over, when the Trump administration began. That is something that Hegseth, the Defense Secretary, has spoken about many times, so no huge surprise that that has been a focus of what he's been discussing, and he's been saying that there needs to be no standard for excellence within the department outside of excellence. In other words, that there should be no reason that gender or race or any other factor should be helping to elevate one member of the military over another. And he said that if any service members who are listening to what he has to say and don't like what he's saying, they should leave the service. So he's been very blunt. We are expecting to hear from President Trump joining that address at Quantico, the military base in Virginia. Before long, he took off from the White House, but as far as we have seen, has not yet landed at Quantico. Not clear yet when he'll be joining Hegseth up on stage.
Okay, we'll be looking to hear more about that. All right, let's go back to the shutdown now. And what do we know about the sit-down yesterday that the president had with congressional leaders?
It did not go particularly well. That much seems clear because there was absolutely no breakthrough that came out of that. And judging by the comments that we've heard from both sides since, it appears that there's really not even any serious negotiations underway. And that leaves federal workers, the nation, bracing for a shutdown, likely to kick in just after midnight tonight. So this was a meeting of the top 4 congressional leaders with President Trump and with Vice President J.D. Vance at the White House. Afterward, the vice president said bluntly he thinks we're headed toward a shutdown. Again, Republicans have wanted to have Democrats sign on to the short-term funding bill that passed in the House without requiring bipartisan support. It does need support from Democrats to pass through the Senate. And Democrats are holding out to reverse health care cuts and extend Obamacare subsidies set to expire at the end of the year. Republicans have said, let's have that discussion later on after we ensure that the government remains open. But Democrats are saying that they don't trust GOP promises to take the issue up later and that they think it's too important not to address now when they think they have the opportunity. President Trump spoke briefly before he took off from the White House to head to Quantico. He was asked about comments he'd made that a shutdown could bring mass firings of federal workers, and he said again that that was likely to happen, that it could be a lot of workers.
All right, Alice, we have less than a minute. I want to talk to you quickly about the president. He posted an AI-generated video last night of 2 top congressional Democrats. What's behind all that?
Yeah, so this was a video that was clearly manipulated. There's a sombrero edited onto Hakeem Jeffries, the top Democrat in the House, and the Senate's top Democrat, Chuck Schumer, is delivering a manipulated, certainly appears to be AI-generated speech, certainly with things that he would never say. And Senator Schumer responded to the president, if you think your shutdown is a joke, it proves you can't negotiate. You can only throw tantrums. Jeffries said, quote, bigotry will get you nowhere. So it's not a pretty picture right now between the two sides, and certainly is a further sign of just how far apart the two sides are and how unserious the state of play seems to be with the clock ticking down to midnight. Chesley.
All right, Alice, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. All right, credit score averages are falling, especially among young borrowers. We will get the latest after the break. Stay right there. All right, welcome back. It turns out your credit score may be on a little bit of a diet. It's shedding points. And behind those trim numbers are some heavy financial pressures weighing on Americans. The Fair Isaac Corporation, or FICO, says its average score in the U.S. dipped to 715 this year, down 2 points from last year. And that's the biggest one-year drop since the Great Recession. Young borrowers took the brunt as Gen Z scores fell about 3 points, leaving their average at about 676, well below the national mark. Credit card delinquencies have surged nearly 50% since 2001, signaling more Americans are struggling to keep up with paying those bills. Here to explain what's behind this dip is our consumer expert and friend of the show, Morgan Ward. How you doing?
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, pretty good. All right, so what's the big pictures and when it comes to this story, and what's behind why this is happening now?
Just as you said, Chesley, the scores are going down, and they are on the fastest decline since 2008. So we have that across the board, but again, as you said, Gen Z is suffering the most. The reasons for it are very linked to the economy. Things that we've been talking about. So we have high inflation and we have rising prices, and those two things work in conjunction. So meaning you're paying higher prices and your interest rates are higher, which means that we have higher credit card debt. And so that is raising the incidence of scores going down.
What does a 2-point drop in the national average really mean for the everyday consumer?
For the everyday consumer, it has 2 points isn't a huge deal, but is starting to have implications. So it makes it harder for us to get more credit. It makes it harder for us to rent homes. Your employers often see that score, so people have impressions of that, and it just makes money more expensive for you to attain, essentially.
So if you're a consumer out there worried about your credit score slipping a little bit here, what's the single most impactful step you can take right now?
It's paying your credit debt and making sure that that debt is under 35% of your total credit. So that's a very important inflection point number. When you have less than 35% usage of your credit, you tend to have a higher credit score. And then, of course, this disproportionately affects Gen Z for a bunch of reasons, but some of them being that they don't have a long credit history, and also they have been recently faced with all of these rising costs that are linked to the debt from schools, which they have started to have to pay these days.
Is that what it is? When we talk about Gen Z, is it just the loan debt that they have? What really, I guess, mistakes should they avoid taking?
Well, Gen Z has to be particularly mindful of making sure that they're paying their credit card debt because they have less credit in general, less credit history, and often less access to money. So even if they have a small amount in a sort of absolute way, that's probably a large proportion of the access that they have. But of course, now they are required to pay back their student loans, and that has caused some delinquencies as people have started to have to change and integrate that new cost into their oftentimes lower salaries.
Mm-hmm. Looking ahead, do you expect the scores to keep sliding down, or do you think we're bottoming out here?
I think that as interest rates decline and hopefully we see less sort of inflation in our pricing, I think that people will use their debt a little bit differently and people will be more likely to pay down their debt and not to accumulate quite as much.
All right, last question here. It's got to be a quick one here. We got about 30 seconds left. Bottom line, what should Atlanta families be watching for as the credit scores dip?
It's really important to be paying on time, and also just as important to try to keep that credit card debt low. So if you can possibly pay with your free cash, that would be the best decision right now.
There it is. Morgan Ward. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Always good insight right there. Plenty more stories for you coming up after the break, folks. This is The Take, and we're back right after this. Welcome back to the show. A looming government shutdown could stall services, strain families, and leave tens of thousands of Georgians without pay. The latest figures show roughly 111,000 federal employees in Georgia could be affected by furloughs or job cuts if the government begins its shutdown at midnight tonight. More than 60,000 federal workers in Metro Atlanta may see delayed paychecks or unpaid work as services stall. Both furloughed and essential workers would miss regular pay days, straining households until funding is restored. Let's look at the pressure a shutdown will have on the state's economy here with Raymond Hill, Associate Professor Emeritus of Finance at Emory University. Welcome to the show.
Hey, good morning.
All right. Let's start off with the basics. What does a federal government shutdown really mean for Georgia families' pocketbooks right now?
Well, I think you've said it exactly right, which is that federal workers will miss some paychecks. They'll eventually get paid, but during the shutdown, they won't get paid. And, you know, that's really the main effect on Georgia families.
Yeah, we hear about 111,000 federal workers here in Georgia could be impacted by this. What does that number really mean in real world terms?
Well, okay, so first of all, I think it's more like 70,000 because there are certain postal workers, for instance, get paid because they're on a different system. So it's a little bit smaller than that. Here's the takeaway for me, okay? In the past, this has been a political event, all right? So people, their paychecks are slow for a while, but they end up getting paid. You can't go to a national park for a couple of weeks. But then the consequences of this going on for a long time are very severe. And so the politicians then somebody caves, and they're back to normal. So there's really, in the past, has not been a significant downward economic effect on this. Now we're living in a different world where we've got a president who is much more comfortable with uncertainty, and where his stated objective is to reduce the number of workers and the expenditures in the federal payroll. So he's essentially daring the Democrats to close down the government because he's not going to suffer from that in his own mind. So I don't think we've ever been in a situation where the incentives were this strong to keep the government closed, both from the Democrat side, they're Schumer's under a lot of pressure from what he did in the spring, and Trump certainly, he's got all the leverage here. So this is very severe, because what happens is not only we get those paychecks, but we've got contractors who don't get paid. Federal work stops. People still get their Social Security payments. The mail still goes, because those are different systems, all right? But the rest of it, and you think about the country as a whole, where you've got, maybe 2.25 million federal workers who are civilians, and, it's going to be, again, this has the potential for being the first really economic shock of one of these shutdowns.
Wow. So it would happen midnight tonight. How quickly would families here in Georgia feel the squeeze?
Well, they're going to feel it. I don't know when they get paid. Let's say it's Friday of this week. They'll miss that paycheck. Again, Congress has already passed a law that says those paychecks will be made up, but that means people have to live without that cash for however long the shutdown occurs. In the past, that's been probably one paycheck period or two paycheck periods. But as I say, the really severe economic shock comes when that goes on, for longer than one or two paychecks.
Yeah. I got 40 seconds left with you here. Folks outside of the federal workforce, why should they care, and how does this trickle down to the everyday Georgian?
Well, it trickles down because the whole economy is going to slow down as a result of this if it goes on for a long time. Again, in the past, it has not been a big economic event unless you were a federal worker, okay? Everything went back to normal. What people have to keep their eye on here is, are we at an impasse where Trump has no incentive to cave, the Democrats have too much pressure not to cave, then this becomes a 2-month or a 3-month shutdown instead of a 2-week one or 3-week one as we've had in the past.
All right, Raymond Hill, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your insight.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
All right, take care. Folks, we got plenty more stories for you coming up. You don't want to go anywhere. This is The Take, and we're back right after this. Well, the state says it's caring for about 500 kids abandoned by their parents, believing it is the only way to get mental and behavioral health care for them. Lawmakers will be meeting in about an hour to figure out how to improve services so that those children can stay at home. This is a problem that senior investigator Rebecca Lindstrom has first exposed about 3 years ago, and she joins us now. Rebecca, did lawmakers already pass a bill to fix this gap that we have?
They did, Chesley. It was a historic mental health reform bill led by the late House Speaker David Ralston. HB 1013, the Mental Health Parity Act, was paired with millions in additional funding to increase crisis intervention training for police, try to get more people into the workforce, and expand services. But even then, Ralston said this was just the foundation. He knew more work would remain.
Okay. Tell us more about these children that the lawmakers are trying to help.
We did a long series. It was a year-long series called Keeping, talking with parents impacted about the barriers they face. Now, I want to make sure people understand just who these children are. These are usually teenagers with a dual diagnosis. That means they have an intellectual or developmental disability and a significant mental health need. We talked with families who have had their children placed at facilities out of state because we just don't have that level of care here, or they have children that have been in and out of psychiatric facilities, some more than 60 times. That's the number I said, 60 times. Part of that problem isn't that Georgia doesn't have enough part of that is that Georgia does not have enough step-down services. That means it's kind of all or nothing. You're in a residential treatment facility or you are at home meeting with a therapist. There's really nothing to help the family transition. And there aren't a lot of therapists trained to work with these complex needs. The committee that is meeting today actually started their work a few weeks ago. They heard from state agencies involved in providing care to these children. A representative from DFAC stressed they are there to take care of abused and neglected children. The children that end up abandoned to their custody, these are not abused kids. They are children of tired parents who just don't know where else to turn. And she said right now the state is trying to put out a forest fire with a squirt bottle.
In Georgia, foster care is not a voluntary service. It is not meant to meet the mental health needs of a child or protect a family from a child who is a safety risk to the parent and siblings or themselves. But DFACS has become that, and we need help. I want this committee to understand that foster care is not a place. It's a legal custody status. When kids enter foster care from a hospital, they still need a place to go. If they could go to a foster home, they could go to their home with their families, and they can't. We don't have the place for them to go.
So when they gather today, Rebecca, who are they going to hear from this time?
They're going to hear from Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. They've tried to build some case management around the kids that they see revolving through their emergency room. They will hear from several nonprofits that have studied solutions to these problems. And they will hear from the Georgia Advocacy Office. That is a federal watchdog group that works directly with these families. I talked with Joe Serra earlier. He is a GAO advocate who helps families navigate the system, and he pointed out that there are 3 large bureaucracies that impact whether these children receive care, but there's not one number to call. And he says that just makes a system that is ineffective. And so they have actually filed a lawsuit trying to get the state to take action.
And what does that lawsuit seek?
A lot of the same things that we are hearing echoed by the speakers. They want intensive care coordination so these children don't keep cycling through emergency rooms. They want more residential treatment facilities, and they want those step down, those levels of care. They want to expand who is eligible for in-home services, and they want the state to increase access to mobile crisis units so they can respond faster. And I think we're going to be hearing a lot of those same sentiments echoed today at this committee meeting.
Wow, Rebecca, we will be watching that. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you want to catch up on the issues, you can find Rebecca's entire series, Keeping in the Investigation Carousel, under the News tab. That's all you have to do. We'll check back with Rebecca coming up on 11Alive News at 11:30 for the very latest developments for today's meeting. All right, Georgia's race for governor has added a candidate who is making history by launching her campaign yesterday. State Representative Ruwa Romman, the first Muslim woman elected to the state legislature, announced she would be aiming for Georgia's top job. She is pitching herself as a progressive voice focused on working families, rural health care, and housing affordability, and what's shaping up to be a very competitive Democratic field. Here to break down her entry into the race and the impacts on the overall field is friend of the show, Emory political science professor Andrea Gillespie. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, how significant is this now candidate enter into the governor's race?
I think it is significant mainly because of her ideological positioning. While I acknowledge her gender and her ethnic background and her religion, I think what's really important is that she is coming in trying to be a progressive voice in the race. Based on her op-ed writing and other things, we know from her positions that she is progressive, that she has aligned herself with Ruwa Romman, who, is running for New York City mayor. And I think she has been inspired by his campaign to try to inject some of that progressive energy into the Georgia race. And so she's focusing on populist issues, on bread and butter issues, hoping to put a coalition together that she hopes is going to be able to transcend the traditional partisan divides in the state.
What does her candidacy signal about the changing demographics and religious diversity for Georgia's electorate?
Well, I think it's very important for us to acknowledge that Georgia is increasingly diverse and that it's diverse beyond the black-white binary. So she certainly represents that vanguard. She's representing, a district in Gwinnett County, which is, arguably the most racially and ethnically diverse county in the state of Georgia. And she's representing, a growing population of folks who, are not just not born in the United States, but are not also black and white.
Mm-hmm. Are there any advantages that she would have as a newcomer, relatively newcomer, compared to an established Democrat in the race?
I think what she is trying to tap into is what she perceives to be a certain lack of enthusiasm for politics as usual. And she's hoping by offering new ideas and presenting herself as a fresh new voice, she's going to be able to, attract new voters and attract support. The challenge of doing that in Georgia is that Georgia is not New York City. And she's also not running against particularly embattled opponents like Mamdani did against Eric Adams, who had to pull out of the Democratic primary, and Andrew Cuomo. So she's running against establishment figures in a state that is still ideologically more conservative. And that's even true amongst Democratic voters in the state. And she's doing so with relatively little elective experience. And also, we don't know what her fundraising is going to be. And she is young, and her work experience involves political organizing. It doesn't involve having run some other sort of large corporation. So I think there are going to be questions about whether or not she's got the management type of experience in order to be able to handle this job.
Yeah. What role do you expect Romman to play in shaping the Democratic primary, even if she doesn't emerge as the nominee?
Yes, and I think that's a really important role. Sometimes you don't run to win, you run to sort of add to the conversation, and you run to actually influence what the eventual party platform is going to be. And so by entering the race and putting this emphasis on populist issues, on bread and butter issues like healthcare and on minimum wage and on housing, she is going to force her opponents to have a stance on this issue and to either adopt some of her points of view or to explain why she's wrong. And so in that role, she can still play a really important role, even if her candidacy proves to be a long shot candidacy.
All right, Professor Gillespie, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for your insight. Really appreciate it. Always.
Thank you.
All right, take care. President Trump and YouTube have reached a settlement. CNN's Maribel Aber is going to join us in a few to give us the very latest coming up. Stay right there. Welcome back to the show. YouTube and President Trump have reached a settlement in their long-running lawsuit. CNN's Maribel Aber joins us now from the NASDAQ market site in New York. And Maribel, the terms of this deal, could it shape future fights over online speech?
Oh, Chesley, money talks, I'll say that. YouTube will pay President Trump $24.5 million to settle a lawsuit, and it stems from his account suspension following the January 6th attack on the Capitol. $22 million will go to restoration efforts on the National Mall, including the president's proposed White House ballroom. The rest will go to groups like the American Conservative Union. They're the last of the big social media companies after Meta and X to settle a lawsuit with President Trump. YouTube declined to comment publicly beyond the court filing, Chesley.
All right. Now we have tariffs on movies. Trump says yes. Hollywood says no. Break down this standoff for us.
Okay, President Trump, Chesley, says he may soon impose a 100% tariff on foreign-made films. So the announcement came in a Truth Social post Monday. The tariff would apply to all movies made outside the U.S., though it's unclear when it could take effect. Trump first threatened this levy in May, arguing that tax incentives in other countries draw filmmakers away from the U.S. In his post, he singled out California, saying it has been, quote, particularly hard hit. However, California and several other states offer tax incentives to production companies who film in the states. If Trump's tariff is enforced, it would be the first time he's targeted a service like movies rather than a physical import, Chesley.
Oh boy, we'll wait to hear more about that. All right, looks like Ford and GM are cooking up a clever move to extend a valuable EV credit.
So Ford and GM have rolled out plans to keep electric vehicles more affordable after the $7,500 federal tax credit expires today. An exclusive Reuters report says the two automakers are using their lenders to purchase EVs throughout their dealer inventory before the deadline. So this qualifies them for that tax credit. Dealers will then lease those vehicles to customers, building the $7,500 credit into the sales rates or the lease rates. Ford says its offer will run until December 31st. GM didn't give a deadline. Both companies developed their plans after talks with the IRS, reports Reuters, but federal officials haven't commented. Industry experts have warned that EV sales and leases could plunge after the subsidy ends today. But Chesley, bottom line for buyers, you might not see the tax credit directly, but Ford and GM are using it behind the scenes so lease payments come down.
All right, yeah, some incentive there. All right. Now you got to break this down for me. AI and Etsy, what's all that about?
Okay, so Etsy is rolling out this new feature with OpenAI to make shopping faster. Or the new AI tool, what it does is it lets buyers use ChatGPT to search Etsy and instantly purchase products without leaving the chatbot. So let's say a customer sees something they like, they can check out right there instead of clicking through to the seller's site. OpenAI will take a cut of each transaction, which opens an important revenue stream for the company. It's not yet profitable and burning through cash as it races to scale up its computing infrastructure. Now, Etsy shares soared 16% on the news Monday. The same AI feature could soon be offered by other online merchants like Shopify. See, Chesley, I don't really need faster shopping. What I need is solid customer service.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's absolutely right. And I was wondering, I knew AI would be struggling as far as the revenue stream. Now I see where they're going. Maribel Aber, I tell you, you always have it for us. You always have the good stuff.
I got you, Chesley.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Oh, man. All right, folks, don't you go anywhere. Coming up on the show, we're going to talk about how seniors have to adapt to new technology. See how Maribel just drives us right on into that? We'll have that for you right after the break. Stay with us. You know, we spend years organizing closets and basements and other parts of our home, but what about our digital lives? AARP says many older Americans are leaving important files offline that could cause headaches for their families a little bit later down the road. The survey found that 66% of adults at the age of 50 and older say technology enriches their lives, helps them manage money, stay connected, and even support their health. But AARP has also discovered that more than half have not saved vital documents digitally. That includes like driver's license, health insurance policies, home policies, and 34 cited privacy concerns as a top barrier to adapting to the new technology. Let's look into this hesitancy with Tom Camber. He is the executive director of the Older Adult Technology Services for AARP. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Thanks for having me.
All right, what does your research show about older Americans actually feel, how do you feel about adapting to new technology?
Well, we've got two sides to that coin here. We've got, on the one hand, a lot of people using the technology in general. They're really flocking to using these new tools, whether it's social media or online shopping, as we were talking about earlier today. But the problem is that a lot of people are not taking care of what we would call house cleaning. It's passwords, it's settings, it's organizing your documents. It's all that stuff that we know we should do it, but we kind of always put it off to another day. We're finding that's really where the problem lies.
So you see a generational difference within the 50-plus community when it comes to embracing this technology?
Absolutely. As we get older, you know, there are generational features here because we didn't grow up with this technology as younger people. We have to spend a little bit of extra time learning it as we get older, and we don't have the reinforcement from, you know, maybe the job that you have or even younger folks in college or their friends. So you have to take a few minutes and do it and actually go to a website and do it, which is what we're here to set up and help people do.
So those of us who are over 50 years old, you know, what is it about technology that we just don't want to be a part of it?
Well, it's not true that we don't want to be a part of it. It's just that it's different for people. You know, for example, when we hit 60 or get a little bit older, we become targets for a lot of fraud and scams. Mm-hmm. It is, you know, just a feature of modern life that people are trying to get at us a lot. And so we have to be a little bit more thoughtful about how to use the technology so that we're protected. So one of the things we're teaching people to do right now is update their passwords and learn how to use password managers. If you're using a password that you've been using for the last 5 years, it's probably gotten out there and somebody's picked up on it, and now you're vulnerable. So you have to spend a little bit of time every year fixing things like password managers, app settings, and things like that. So a lot of older people are a little bit, you know, sometimes they're not reluctant to use the technology. It's just a matter of making sure they're supported and making sure people use it in a way that's really relevant for their lives right now.
Are they getting frustrated or something with trying to learn that, or is it that they really need to learn on an ongoing basis?
They need to learn on an ongoing basis. I'm sure that you have an older relative or friend that's asked you about technology sometimes, and it creates a kind of a social dynamic where if they don't know the basic thing that everybody seems to be using, maybe it makes them look bad in the family if they ask, like, what is Facebook, when everybody's already using Facebook, right? So people get a little reluctant to ask questions, but we can really address that by being more aware of the fact that not everybody experiences technology the same way, and making sure that people have a chance to learn it in a supportive way. We're a nonprofit organization. We're affiliated with AARP, and we provide all our programs for free for anybody over 50. It just makes it a lot easier for people to ask questions and get online and get that support.
Yeah. What are the warning signs, or what are some of the warning signs that older adults should be watching out for that could mean their personal information may be compromised?
Well, the big warning sign really is about how prepared you are. You'll know if your bank calls up and says, is this an unauthorized, expenditure, or the other big warning sign could be on the health side. Maybe there's an illness that you're feeling that may be coming on, or people, as we get older, we're at risk for dementia, we're at risk for a lot of things. And so the warning signs in this scenario are really about how long have you been putting this stuff off. We created a new website specifically to help people get ahead of the curve on this. It's at seniorplanet.org/digital house cleaning. We're for free. We don't charge for any of this. We just put a series of trainings online with 5 different steps that people can take to get at those challenges ahead of when you might have a crisis.
So you just go to that website and you can watch the training right there. Give us that website one more time.
Absolutely. It's at seniorplanet.org/digital house cleaning. And if you go there, you'll find for free, it's real easy, and it's all designed for people over 50. We work with AARP on this as well, to make sure that you have 5 steps that you can take to get yourself organized. And really, it relieves you of the stress that maybe there's stuff you forgot to look at. So we look at app permissions. A lot of those apps that you put on your phone, they're tracking you, they're selling your information. We teach you how to restrict that and limit it to what you want. We teach you to update your passwords and use password managers, look at your social media settings, and then finally there's all those critical documents, the health documents and the financial documents. How do you store those, and how do you use even a more modern tool called digital vaults to make sure you have better security and more sharing options for when you're going to need other people in your family or your care community to take care of you.
Tom, I think you got about 100 people that just moved up in their seat just a little bit there. What's the one thing you want them to know in 30 seconds real quick of why this is so important?
The one thing I want people to know is these are the things you put off until tomorrow, and when tomorrow happens, it's too late. So when you get done listening to the station today, take a minute, go to seniorplanet.org/digital house cleaning, and just check it out. Give it a start, so that once you get started with these things, you'll see that it's easy. It's actually not that difficult, and it's kind of fun to do it together with a nonprofit like us, so that you can get supported while you're through it. There's even a hotline you can call that's right there on the website.
Tom Camber, thanks so much for your insight today. Thanks so much for that information, man. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
All right, take care. Another look at your forecast, plus my final take when we come back. Stay right there. Folks, you are looking at the forecast, and it does show that our temperatures will be right where they should be for this time of year. 80 degrees for the high temperature today. We'll have a slight chance for an isolated shower or two. 83 degrees for the high temperature on Wednesday under partly sunny skies, and then the cool down happens by Thursday and Friday. High temperatures down into the 70s both days, and we'll stay right there as we head through the weekend. The chance of rain comes back to us as we head into the beginning of next week. In fact, Sunday a 20% chance, and then a 30% chance as we head into Monday. We need the rain. About a little over 4 inches down for the year, and September was the 5th driest month, barring that we don't get a downpour today, the 5th driest month on record. Yep, since we've been keeping records back since the late 1800s. So there you have it, folks. All right, my final take. Will someone please tell me what happened to my favorite sport growing up? I'm talking about professional boxing. It was a must-see, or at least a must-hear. I can remember back in the day listening to the fight on the radio, the Ali fights with my father. It was little. Oh, man, it was a must-see, man. People would gather throughout the neighborhood to watch the latest Mike Tyson fight. It brought the whole community together. You sit there and you watch the fight. And now boxing has been reduced to gimmicks. Can you believe this? The latest announcement that Mike Tyson, who's 59 years old, has agreed to fight an exhibition fight against Floyd Mayweather Jr., who's 48 years old. Both of them great in their own time, but I'm sorry, they're old, all right? So there's few details about the match, other than that both sides have agreed to it, and it will likely take place in the spring of 2026. As sad as it is for the sport, as sad as it is for those two great fighters, I'm probably going to watch it. Sad for me, too. And the sport. Man, want to bring it back so badly. That's all we have for you today, folks. Make sure you have a great day and try to encourage someone, especially those of us who lost boxing. Jeez.